Chapter 1. I had a friend named Big Dog who killed himself in the home goods department with a blender. He started with his left hand and pushed it into the blender until his whole body had touched the twirling blades. And he did not stop screaming until it was over. Later, a cashier found his wedding ring in a pile of meat and sold it online for a sliver of Bitcoin. He traded that Bitcoin in for heroin to impress a girl who didn't know his name. Tomorrow, the world will keep turning. No one will see the kingdom of heaven without sacrifice. Chapter 2. I picked up a man outside of a prison who had a unique perspective. He asked me if I was familiar with the trolley problem and told me about all the lives he saves and about a man he pinned inside of a blue sedan, and how he waited for that man to die from the brain hemorrhaging. The police found a rifle in the dead man's trunk and 15 magazines of ammunition, all legal to own in that state. My friend the Trolley Man knew the dead man was headed to a concert and T-boned him in an intersection. The Trolley Man said the would-be gunman died innocent, confused, begging for his mother who passed away 5 years prior. The Trolley Man knows the world to come and knows where to be to make it so. I left him outside of a house that did not belong to him, where the Trolley Man said the children were still at school, and he said we would meet again outside of a prison in another state, and we did. We are brought together to see the great work in motion. Chapter 3. A woman I know likes to wait in bank lines. She wears a floral dress and smiles. She likes the stale air and the sound of dry pens scratching cheap paper. And when the bankman tells the mother of 3 there's no more money for her. She likes to go to the bankman's home and sit in his bushes. She wears a floral dress and smiles. She likes the thick summer air and the way the rusty swing set squeals, and when the bankman's wife cries after the cold dinner and the yelling. She likes to lay in the bankman's spare room while the bankman and the bankman's wife try to have a child again. And again, and again, and again, and she wears a floral dress and smiles. She likes the air conditioning and the short, sharp breaths, and when the bankman thinks about the beautiful woman in the floral dress who smiles so pretty from the bank line. It is our dedication which will bring us to our salvation. Chapter 4. A baby boy was born in the parking lot of a motel under a full moon howling. He had a name, but it was never once spoken aloud, and his mother died in the back of that cab due to complications. He grew up with a different name, but his friends called him Fatso, and he worked as a clerk at a gas station not too far from where we're at now. One day, hungry men in funny masks held him at gunpoint and emptied out the register, calling him Fatso, and left him his cut out by the dumpster, just like they promised they would. They wrote his name on the envelope, or at least they thought they did, but they didn't know his name, and neither did he. Fatso paid off his landlord and the girls he liked to look at on his phone and went to bed, but not to sleep. Fatso died some years later, in the back of a taxi on his birthday, just like his mother. And when the great work called out to him, he didn't recognize the name. Heaven knows us by our names, and we must oblige. Chapter 5. Once there was a sunrise that crested the mountain over this shrinking factory town, and it was met with the silence of those that left and the weeping of those that stayed. Rusted car roofs and smoldering once houses did not smile back at the cotton candy sky as the people used to, except for the key man, who twirled his ring of keys on his finger and who walked from dusk through dawn, and just about when the church bells started to ring, he'd pass out in a heap in the now cooled pit of some poor sucker's insurance fraud. And after the bells stopped, he'd wake up thirsty and wade through the ashes till he found another key to a place that didn't quite exist anymore. Put that key on the ring, whistle, walk till just after the bells began to ring, do it all again. The key man jingles now like a ghost in chains, but he's the only one that smiles when the sun rises over that shrinking factory town. The great work has a keyway for each man who embraces it smiling. Chapter 6. You are here because something is wrong. You feel it in your chest, in the thumping against your rib cage. But you ignore it because you have been taught to ignore it, and you have been taught well to ignore the wrong thumping in your chest. Then you feel it in your head, in the thumping against the inside of your skull. But you ignore it because you've been taught well to ignore it. And you have been taught well to ignore the wrong thumping in your head. Except that the thing that ignores the thumping is itself the root cause of it. So you try to ignore that something is wrong, and you do not use the word wrong, but you know that something is. That word you've so carefully denied yourself. But your spirit knows the word wrong. And your spirit knows its place in the great work. And so you found these words. And you will ignore them, because you have been taught to ignore them. And you have been taught well to ignore the thumping of your spirit in the great work. And yet, you are here all the same. Heaven is the ringing in your ears. Chapter 7. My friend Boss Man loved a girl named Daisy, and Daisy loved him back. Boss Man had a job telling little men what to do, and the little men didn't like him telling them what to do, but the big men paid Boss Man the big bucks to be the little men's target, and he was fine at it. Daisy worked at a hair salon. She did all right. Her first husband snorted till his kids hated him and he had a heart attack. Everything works out for Daisy. Boss Man and Daisy got married. Her kids carried the rings up to her, and the rings fit just right on the fingers, and Boss Man and Daisy lived happily for a few months, smoking cigarettes from soft gold packs on the back porch that Boss Man bought with the money the big men paid him to keep the little men off their backs. Now, Boss Man was quite a bit older than Daisy, and Daisy loved a lot more people than just little old Boss Man. But Boss Man had his fair share of loves, too. She loved when one of the little men called in too sick to work, and he loved every empty glass bottle added to his collection. One day, Boss Man drove home for lunch and found Daisy and the little man smoking on the porch he bought. Boss Man sees little man, sees Boss Man, sees Daisy, sees Boss Man. Boss Man gets out of the car. Little man stands up from the chair. Daisy can explain. Boss Man steps forward. Little man steps backward. Daisy brings the empty glass bottle down on the back of little man's head. Boss Man approaches. Little man goes dark. Daisy has a gift. Boss Man picks up little man, ties up little man in the basement. Daisy has a gift. Boss Man gets angry. Boss Man throws things. Little man gets hit. Daisy has a gift. Boss Man gets drunk. Boss Man throws things. Little man gets hit. Daisy has a gift. Boss Man gets bored. Boss Man throws things. Little man gets hit. Everything works out for Daisy. The righteous will their way forward. Chapter 8. Me and Queen were never friends in any definition of the word. She lived up in the top floor of a building built to break down, and she liked to flicker smokes out the window. As it so happened, I would often be sitting on the bench beneath her window, and more than once caught a still smoldering cigarette in my hair. Queen had two sons, Prince and Jester. Jester made a name for himself out in the big city selling stocks to folks who would never be as rich as him, so nobody calls him Jester anymore. Prince did his senior year a few times till they finally kicked him out, and this sent Queen into a huff through the high school office. Do you know who I am? And all that. Prince sells cars now, and I've bought a few from him. Queen's still up in that apartment, and her sons don't talk to her much. She's still alive. I drive by every now and then to check if she's finally kicked the bucket. But one day, she won't be flicking cigarettes into the wind anymore. And when that day comes, nothing much in the world will change at all. We enter heaven in each other's embrace, or not at all. Chapter 9. His friends call him Killer, and he likes to howl at the moon. Always carries two heavy knives on his belt, keeps them sharp, calls them his fangs. Sure, Killer talks a big game about a time in a back alley in a big city, whichever one is on the news this week, since his friends don't tend to stick around too long. And sure, he did kill that man, in self-defense. But Killer doesn't talk about what came after. Killer didn't leave that fancy room he rented in that unnamed big city for 4 whole months, scrubbing his hands over and over again. Out damn spot. You get the picture. Mom's calling him. He lets his phone ring and ring. Cars honk below on the street. He got let go from that fancy finance job Jester set him up with because Killer didn't feel like showing up anymore. Folks knock on his door. Eviction notices, court dates, cheap delivery on the credit card, beard growing longer and longer. One day, Mom shows up and drags him out of that apartment and back to the hometown where he started talking to a nice lady in business attire with a degree on the wall. Things go well. He asks her out. That would be unprofessional. He doesn't talk to the nice lady anymore. Now, he goes to the bowling alley and makes friends with the other men who carry knives and guns on their belts and talk about self-defense with a hunger in their throats. In the parking lot, Killer howls like a wolf, and the men who are afraid of whichever big city is on the news this week all laugh. Shame is the tool of those who would denigrate the great work. Chapter 10. Life pulled me and Betsy apart after the night when I helped deliver her twins, and she spent the time between grunts talking about immaculate conception. She named one Bill and the other one something else just to tell them apart. I rolled through town a time or two after that night, always taking pains to avoid noticing the work Betsy got up to when the lights got low. Bill and the other one were sent out to the park when Betsy knew the work would get loud, and it often would get loud. Now, Betsy didn't like Bill's brother much. She had a way of talking about her second son that made anyone who would hear her not like him much either. She liked Bill, though, showered him with love and gifts, both of which would be whipped away the second they were shared with the other, lesser specimen. All that said, Bill was his brother's de facto keeper, since Betsy didn't want to do it. And Bill loved his brother, though he hated every bit of himself that felt that way, and laid awake most nights trying to kill that part of him. So one night, Betsy's work was to get loud again, and she sent Bill and Bill's de facto ward to the park to play. The ward was swinging when a stranger asked the keeper, "You ever seen a $2 bill, kid?" Bill hadn't, and the stranger showed him the legal tender. "How'd you like to keep it?" said the stranger, and frankly, Bill knew that his mother needed the money. When she wasn't showering him with affection, she was talking about her two problems: too little money and too many sons. So Bill nodded yes. "Take it," said the stranger, and he crumpled the bill in the kid's hand. "Take it all the way home." But when Bill went to call out to his brother, the stranger put a finger over his lips. "And leave your brother here," he said. Now Bill's mother, who used to be a friend of mine till life pulled us apart, only ever talked about two problems. So he turned, and he went home, and no one ever mentioned that other brother again. Heaven bears the weight of our worth in silver and gold.